is continuous. So once you get out of this interrupt service routine and go back to the main program, you're going to go back to it. You see the point?
That should be an infinite loop.
Now we exited the interrupt service routine by saying return from subroutine. If you return from subroutine, you're going to go back to here, branch here. But the same thing will repeat again. If you are in here, return here, and then the interrupt request is already being pressed from the beginning and up till now, you're still gonna go to respond to the interrupt. You're gonna go through this again to the org this, and then to the you're gonna start this loop again. So you're gonna keep going back and forth between the interrupt service routine and this dummy loop in the main program. You're gonna be staying in. So we started with this statement in the main program. When the press was switch was when the switch was pressed, we went to the interrupt service routine. When we finished the interrupt service routine, we went back to the main program. But when we went back to the main program, nothing has changed. The situation is as is. The interrupt is being requested still. It's continuously being requested. So you're going to go back to execute the interrupt service routine again and again and again. And the transfer of control is going to keep switching back and forth between the main program as exemplified by this sentence and this piece of the interrupt service routine. So this is going to be repeated continuously. This is going to be repeated continuously. I would like to read a couple of comments here. If the interrupt request pin is still low, look at that. This is a very important statement. If the interrupt request pin is still low by the time the microcontroller requests the return from interrupt instruction, the microcontroller initiates the interrupt again. See? So it's a continuous process. As long as you're pressing the switch, you're going to keep this, you're going to keep doing this back and forth all the time. You're going to keep alternating between the interrupt service routine and that statement, which is the main program here, branch here. So you're going to keep going to the interrupt service routine and exiting the interrupt service routine an endless number of times as long as the interrupt request pin is activated. Now let's complete the rest of the statement. Therefore, and that's why it's blinking. If the switch is kept activated, the LED keeps blinking. It keeps blinking. Well, to end this situation, to end this problem, the IRQ pin must be brought back to high by the time the RTI is executed. So the interrupt request pin must be brought back high by the time the RTI is executed. How do we do that?
You you put I think a B set in TCR and on the between STAA port B and RTI. Would you do that or no?
I have a feeling that you're saying something important. Could you repeat it and say it
Oh,
slowly, please?
okay. So what I'm trying to say is that would you put a you would put another one of these right here, that one, but in between this before the RTI.
What do you want to put before the RTPI?
Uh, that one, the B set, but you want to make it 1-0 or something instead of 0-1.
What are you going to set exactly?
I wanna make it 1-0-0-0-0, or is that wrong?
The cure to this problem is that the interrupt pin itself must be brought high. So you need a hardware action.
A hardware action. Okay. Well, I'll try. I don't know.
You know, the most obvious solution to this problem, the hardware action,
Mm-hmm.
is to use an edge triggered interrupt, not a level triggered interrupt.
Yeah, that's why I try to say, like do the
Yeah,
100 instead.
yeah. But as
Make it.
long as you're doing this, you keep going back and forth between the interrupt service routine and the main program, and there is no end for this. That's gonna be endless. By the way, I have doubts about the exact implementation of this program. If you write this program as is, it most probably not gonna work. You need to have a delay loop here before
Mm.
the interrupt, before return from interrupt. You know why? Because you say store accumulator A import B. You need to wait enough time so that you can see port B. Do you remember the theory of the movie, which I mentioned last time?
Yeah, the
The,
pictures.
the human eye cannot keep track of events moving that fast. So it cannot see this to be a logic one, and then after 1 microsecond, it's going to be logic zero, and then after another microsecond, it's going to be logic one. The human eye cannot keep track of that because this alternation between main program and interrupt service routine takes place in microseconds. Maybe this loop will probably take several hundreds of microseconds this along this instruction. The human eye cannot catch up with this because it's going to see one state only for the switch. That's why it's going to see the switch. For the only way to have a meaningful vision is to by incorporating a delay loop here, and this before the interrupt, return from interrupt. Before you return from interrupt, you can put some delay here. Maybe you need to uh, make a delay loop of 100 milliseconds or something like that. If you put a delay loop here of 100 milliseconds, so you're gonna see the port at logic zero for 100 milliseconds, and then you're gonna go back again to the main program, and then you're gonna get to that point. It's gonna be switched. So instead of being off for 100 milliseconds, it's going to be on again for 100 milliseconds, and then it's going to be off again for 100 milliseconds. So you can see the alternation as soon by incorporating a good delay loop here before the return from interrupt instruction. But if you don't incorporate a delay loop before the return from interrupt instruction, you won't be able to distinguish between what you see in two consecutive times you enter and exit the interrupt service routine. So my advice to you in the lab is that you need to have some delay loop here. If you put 50, 100, 50 or 100 milliseconds, that will do the job. Uh, there is another way of doing this by edge triggering. Maybe we can talk about this here for another quickly in 5 minutes
Oh, 1-1.
and then let you go. Uh, it is the same example, but we use an edge triggered situation. The only way this is going to be manifested is by changing the contents of the interrupt control register. Remember last time we had a 1-0 here at the last significant bit. So we're going to have a 1-1 here, which means there's an edge triggered here. Go back to this table. Go back to this figure. There's an edge triggering now instead of level triggering, and everything else is the same. Now let's see how is this going to manifest itself on the performance, on what you actually see. All right. Pressing the switch will toggle the LED. The LED will not toggle again until the next falling edge press of the switch. So the you're going to see the status of the switch off, for example, and that's it. It's going to stay off. It's not going to continuously be blinking. It's not going to blink anymore. Blinking means it's up and down, continuously on, off, on, off. It's going to be blurry, as a matter of fact. You won't see the continuous on, you won't see the continuous off. It's going to be very, very blurry. But in order to distinctively see what's happening between the on and off, you need to have edge triggering. So you can see the on for a while, and you can see the off for a while. And that, of course, depends on, look at that. The edge triggering. This is the edge triggering. So when you trigger the pin with an edge, that's going to declare interrupt. All right. Now you exit interrupt here. You go back to the main program, here, branch here, and then you go back. Nothing will happen. There will be no response to going back to the interrupt service routine. There is no, the interrupt service routine is not going to be continuously called unless there is an edge. Do you see what I'm saying? In this very first example where we had level triggering, the interrupt service routine was being requested 1,000,000 times in 1 second, because level triggering and the interrupt request was requesting interrupt continuously. When you make it edge triggering, you are only restricting the request of interrupt to the moment when there is an edge. So that depends on the frequency of the edge. If the edge takes place every 100 milliseconds, for example, you're going to see the switch blinking 10 times a second. If you're going to select the edge, all you need to apply is a square wave or a rectangular waveform. If you have an edge occurring every 100 milliseconds, by selecting a good hardware, by doing